So good afternoon, everybody. It's good to have you here. We have with us the presidents and prime minister of Azerbaijan, of Armenia and Georgia. And I didn't know this, but the president of Azerbaijan just told me that this is a historic meeting. This is for the first time in history that the three leaders of these countries meet. We have to check this in the history book. I know the foreign ministers met, but Helga Schmidt, the Secretary General of the OSCE, nods, and if she nods, this must be true. So thank you very much for joining us here. This conference, of course, as we all know, is happening 1 year after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and this conference continues like last year to have this as the main topic. Now, your countries are not directly involved, but you are neighbors to Russia. And my first question is, how has Russia's invasion, the war against Ukraine, how has this affected your respective countries? President Ալիև, if I may ask you.
Well, I would say that there was not a direct impact on us, but definitely the general geopolitical situation has changed completely and probably will not go back to the time before Russian-Ukrainian war. So we can see some disadvantages with respect to trade cooperation with some traditional partners. At the same time, some advantages, especially with respect to connectivity projects. Azerbaijan for many years invested in creation of modern transportation and logistical infrastructure. And now the diversion of cargo transportation from Central Asia across Azerbaijan to Europe creates additional opportunities. But you know that we had our own war, something more than 2 years ago, which lasted for 44 days. And we know what is war. We know what kind of devastation and suffering it brings to the peoples. Therefore, we, of course, want peace to be established in Eurasia. And I think that Azerbaijan and Armenia need to demonstrate that the transition from long-lasting standoff, mutual hatred, and hostility must end. We are now working on peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Hopefully we will conclude it sooner than later. And I think that could be a good example how countries which had serious historical disagreements can get together and turn the page of hostility. So that would be my answer.
Thank you very much. And before I ask the Prime Minister of Armenia to respond to this, I would pass through Georgia. Georgia, of course, has these occupied territories, Abkhazia, South Ossetia. And what is the effect now for your country from the side of Russia? Are there still, how about the Geneva talks? Is there anything happening? How has this impacted you?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for organizing this panel discussion. I think this is very good initiative and historic meeting, as you mentioned, when the three leaders of the South Caucasus get together, and I think this is a great, already successful meeting, and thank you for organizing this discussion. When it comes to the war in Ukraine, of course, this is a big challenge for all of us. Since World War II, I think Europe and the world in general has not experienced such a big challenge. You know that in 2008 we had a war with Russia, and since then Russia occupies our historic territories, Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Russia has 2 military bases on our territory, and since then we have been facing lots of problems, challenges. But after we came to power in 2012, we have made lots of efforts in order to de-escalate the tension. De-escalate tension, and at the same time, of course, we have been very active on our European integration path. Georgia signed association agreement, deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with the European Union. We got the visa-free regime, and last year this was a historic decision when the European Council decided to give us European perspective. So to respond to your question, how the war in Ukraine affects all of us in Georgia, right now we all see that Russia is focused on Ukraine. It's a devastating war, and I have to say that we must do everything in order to stop this war. There is no alternative to peace, and I have to tell you that Georgia has been pursuing a peaceful resolution policy when it comes to the restoration of sovereignty and territorial integrity of our country. We have made it very clear that Georgia has a peaceful plan to restore its territorial integrity. I want to thank the OSCE, EU, US, and other participants who have been actively involved in the mediation process. You mentioned, Ms. Hoisgen, Geneva international discussions. This is the only platform that we have right now with the Russians. And so therefore, I must repeat again that this war must be stopped. We have seen this war and the effects of this war in our country in 2008. And a lot of people died, and we lost control on our territories completely. And as I said, Russia has military bases on our territory, and it's ongoing. It doesn't stop. I also want to mention that since 2008 war, we haven't seen any sanctions that were imposed on Russia. On the contrary, we saw that business continued as usual. Therefore, it was a very, let's say, bad signal. To conclude, I think the international community now must decide how we move forward, because if this war continues, it means more devastation, more killings of civilians. So therefore, once again, I want to repeat that our intention, our main, let's say, goal has to be to stop this war.
Yes, I think you are absolutely right. The killing has to stop. But let me just briefly come back to your country. You mentioned 2008, and I was at the time advisor to the chancellor, and it was a very, very difficult situation where we don't have to go into detail. But going back to 2008, may I ask you? At that time, we dealt with President Saakashvili, and we have seen alarming pictures, photos of President Saakashvili in a very delicate situation, and people are afraid for his life, and there's also a journalist who is in a different situation. I have the impression your country, that what is called in times of, in harsh times, in times where you have a war in the region, that it calls for national unity. And is this something, there is something where from the outside one has doubt that this is happening in your country? And as I said, President Saakashvili was a host, was a guest very often here at the Munich Security Conference. And as I said, these alarming pictures there, is there not a possibility so that he can get out and get some treatment in hospitals outside Georgia?
Well, first of all, thank you for this question. I don't want to talk about and speculate about the health of President Saakashvili, who is now in a private hospital. I want the people to know that he arrived in Georgia. He came back in Georgia 2 years ago, actually more than a year and a half ago, October 1st, to be more precise. The idea of his comeback was to make another revolution in Georgia, to organize mass killings and bloodshed. He failed, and he ended up in jail. So he requested that we transfer him in private hospital. I don't want to bother the audience about the details, but since you asked this publicly, I have to respond. So he has been in the private hospital for more than 8 months, and the Georgian government has been providing maximum support, maximum comfort, all the privileges that other prisoners are not receiving. You mentioned the pictures and photos. I want to say that Mr. Saakashvili is a good actor. Georgian government has been doing everything we can, the maximum support. Again, I want to repeat. We even made proposal, offer to his family to bring any doctors from any hospital or from any country to provide medical, in case he needs medical support in Georgia. So this is my answer. And I also want to mention that probably you have seen lots of fake news, disinformation that has been spreading by the lobbying firms of Mr. Saakashvili and his family. For example, I want to give you just a fact. Last month it was disclosed that his family officially paid $1 million to launch an aggressive media campaign all around the world. So what you hear, what you see on the videos or on Facebook or social network does not actually describe the reality. So therefore, no one stands above the law. We are building a strong democracy in Georgia. We are building, strengthening democratic institutions. This is the understanding of democracy, I guess, that no one should be above the law. Saakashvili committed grave crimes, such as the killings of former banker Gergliani. This was a famous case. Beating up to death former member of parliament, and many other cases, seizure of private TV channel Imedi, for example. Plus, he added another crime, which is the crossing illegally state border. By the way, for your information, he spent 2 days in a container truck, refrigerator, when took a ferry boat from Ukraine, from Odessa, to come back to Georgia to do revolution. So this is the story. I didn't want to talk about this individual here at this panel to bother you all the details, but since you asked, Mr. Hoisgen, I want to respond about this.
Yeah, I don't want to deepen into it, just a humanitarian appeal I would like to launch there. Prime Minister Phashinian, coming back to the question I asked at the outside also to President Aliyev, the repercussions of the war of Russia against Ukraine on your country.
Thank you. I also would like to express my gratitude to you and for organizing such a format. And really, I agree, maybe it is a historic meeting, but it's very important to identify the content of the history that now is being created, because we can have different outcome, consequences or results, and I think we need to be result-oriented, and that is our approach. And as far as your question is concerned, you know, global instability can make things in our region better. Because, you know, for a long time, all international attention is concentrated on Ukraine, understandably, and it creates new risks for our region. And it's very important to keep the international attention to our region as well, because I think there are many risks to be managed. What is our approach to this whole situation? We stayed devoted to our democratic reform agenda, because we believe that democratic reforms, the development of democratic institutions, rule of law, human rights, independent judiciary, etc., would make the overall situation in our region better, and we think that it is a benefit for whole region for us to do a part of our part of the job.
Yes, thank you very much. This leads me now directly to the Secretary General of the OSCE, Helga Schmidt. Wonderful to be here in your hometown in Munich. Now, the OSCE is an organization where the 3 countries are member of. By the way, an organization where Russia is still a member of. What can the OSCE at this stage do to help also cooperation between the countries, to help to stabilize, to have the instruments that the OSCE has at its disposal at a difficult time for your organization? But what can you do to try to lower tensions and promote cooperation?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm also very happy to be part of this meeting today. But I would, before I come to your question, Christoph, let me just say that we are also witnessing the impact of a horrible earthquake that is affecting Turkey and Syria. And I actually would like to start by paying tribute to all 3 of you, because you have been providing life-saving, very quick support. And I know, particularly I want to pay tribute to you, Prime Minister Pashinyan. I know your Foreign Minister was in Turkey, I think only a couple of days ago, meeting with his Turkish counterpart. And in the face of this tragedy, we actually may find a way to work together. And I think this is very important. But now, there may be no direct impact, as you said, President, when it comes to the war against Ukraine. But we know for sure is that there is really a very strong feeling of insecurity in the wider Black Sea region. And I think the only way forward is really keeping the processes, I agree with you, on the Geneva International discussions, dialogues, but also regional cooperation. The OSCE, and this brings me to your question, has a mandate to promote regional cooperation, also to promote trade links, connectivity. I think that's very important. Now, it's very difficult to build sustainable peace, reconciliation. There are outstanding issues that need to be addressed related to the border, missing people, detainees, also mines. So this is why it's very important to use all the means we have, also on confidence-building measures. For example, regional humanitarian demining efforts could be envisaged. We work a lot already with youth. Youth are the stakeholders of tomorrow, to bring together the leaders of tomorrow with all three countries. You will not be surprised to hear me say that women have to be part of all of that. But regional cooperation is important. I also am very supportive of the Brussels-led dialogue, I think, because it can deliver very concrete results, and also the implementation of the roadmaps agreed. In the end, it's about people. It's about conflict-affected people that deserve a better life for their future.
Thank you. Helga, you mentioned also, Prime Minister Pashinyan, that you are helping in Turkey also now in the face of this horrible earthquake. Do you see a perspective that between Armenia and Turkey, what we have been looking for over many, many years, decades, that there is actually an improvement of relations? At some stage we were close to, again, getting rid of the blockade. And where do you stand there? Is there a perspective that out of this horrible crisis, this catastrophe, humanitarian catastrophe, something good may come out in your relationship?
Thank you. Thank you. Deciding to send humanitarian aid and rescuers to Turkey, we had humanitarian motivations only because millions of people suffered next to us. But in the process, we see quite positive reaction from the Turkish government, and if this step will have political results as well, it's better. But our initial motivation, purely humanitarian, and as we announced, we are ready to provide as many humanitarian support as it is in our capacities, and we are ready to do that. As far as political dialogue is concerned, to be honest, before earthquake, we had political dialogue through the special envoys. And I believe that in reality, this dialogue was very important. I mean, in the creating atmosphere where these decisions were made. And I believe that through this humanitarian conversation and communication, maybe the opportunities for concrete political decisions will be higher. Especially, Minister, you mentioned visited Turkey and some political arrangement were mentioned there, and we are ready to go forward because we believe that really the establishment of diplomatic relations with Turkey and the opening of our border would be very positive, not only in terms of our regional situation, but for international situation as well.
Yeah, let's hope that this comes out. We had originally the Turkish Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu wanted to come here, but of course, due to the situation in the country, he had to stay home. But let's hope that this will lead to something, because this border was closed for far too long, and we have to come also to improvement for the relations there. Now, let me come to the elephant in the room, if you allow me. This is, of course, the question that President Aliyev alluded to at the very beginning, the war that started, is it 2 years ago already? And we see a situation which is still very critical. We are not here to do any negotiations, but of course we are, when you look at it, the outside, the international community, we are concerned about the humanitarian situation, and one looks always, as we have been looking right now with regard to humanitarian aid to Turkey, we are looking at humanitarian steps. We see the Lachin corridor that is seen from the outside blocked, and we wonder, and maybe Prime Minister, you can tell us a bit about maybe efforts to have some confidence building measures there to see that somehow the situation improves, and we would of course all, and afterwards I would like to turn to President Aliyev again, we would of course like to see that through some small steps we come to a de-escalation and come closer to a resolution of this conflict.
Thank you. You're right. It's already 70 days that the Lachin corridor is blocked, and now unfortunately we have a humanitarian crisis in Nagorno-Karabakh and energetic crisis as well. Because electricity supplies to Nagorno-Karabakh have been shut down, and the gas supplies as well have been shut down, and we counted, and during last 70 days the gas supplies were cut at least 10 times, and it is the problem that should be addressed. And our position is that in the trilateral statement from the 9 November 2020, we have very precise provisions connected with Lachin corridor, and according to that statement, it is the obligation of the Azerbaijan and Russian peacekeepers to keep Lachin corridor operable. But now, unfortunately, we have a totally different situation. And I meant Lachin corridor as well, saying that international attention should be kept on this situation, because we are afraid that continuation of this situation can cause unturnable humanitarian consequences for Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh.
President Aliyev, as I said, we are not here. We cannot negotiate the substance of the agreement and how to come to a final conclusion. I think the President of the European Council has been working with you on this. We don't want to get into this. My question is just, do you see, because you were saying that we should use this opportunity now to come to a more stable situation, can you do some humanitarian gestures so that this blockade is being stopped, and the people that, according to what the Prime Minister is just saying, are in Nagorno-Karabakh, are living in very difficult circumstances? Is that something you can do as kind of a goodwill measure, confidence building, so that talks have a chance to succeed in with regard to the more substantial questions that, of course, are not resolved yet?
As far as we understand, and in our communications with our American partners and partners from European Union, And also, as far as I understood from today's trilateral meeting with Prime Minister Phashinyan, which was organized by Secretary Blinken, we have a common understanding that there should be a two-track approach to the situation in the region. First, Azerbaijan-Armenian peace talks track. Second, Azerbaijan's communications with Armenian population in Karabakh. Just for your information, the word Nagorno-Karabakh is no longer valid. This is actually the Russian word. Nagorno means mountainous. And in Azerbaijan, there is not such an administrative unit like Nagorno-Karabakh. Therefore, of course, I would like to ask our partners to respect the sovereignty and constitution of Azerbaijan. There is a Karabakh region of Azerbaijan where there is an Armenian population. So this two-track solution actually separates our talks with Armenia from our internal issues like our communications with Armenians in Karabakh. And also it was agreed with our international partners that there will be discussions on rights and securities of Armenian minority in Karabakh. And we are ready to do it, but with those representatives of Armenian community who lived, who were born, and who lived in Karabakh throughout their life, but not with a person who was exported from Russia to have the leading position in Karabakh. Maybe exported is not the right word. I would probably prefer the word smuggled into, because nobody knows how he emerged in Karabakh and how he is trying and achieving to go back to Yerevan, and from there to Moscow, and then back to Yerevan, and then to Karabakh. Only this fact demonstrates that there is no blockade. Second fact which demonstrates that there is no blockade is that since 12th December until today, when our activists from civil society came to the checkpoint, there have been more than 2,500 vehicles, including trucks, of Russian peacekeepers and the representatives of Red Cross. Almost 100 medical patients from Karabakh were taken by Red Cross to Armenia for treatment. So how can we call it a blockade when there is an open road? And if Armenians in Karabakh try to use this road, I'm sure no one will stop them. So this is important to understand the current situation. And also, in order to properly evaluate the current situation, we need to go back a little bit to the history. For almost 30 years, our lands were under Armenian occupation. Prime Minister Garibashvili mentioned that in 2008, after the Russian-Georgian war, there were no sanctions imposed on Russia. But I also can say that Armenia occupied 20% of Azerbaijan's territory, violated international law, did not comply with UN Security Council resolutions for 27 years, and no sanctions were imposed on them. And we always were asking for sanctions to Armenia to be imposed to avoid the war. We were waiting for Minsk Group to deliver result. We were waiting for Security Council of United Nations to respect their resolutions. But we thought that there is no movement, and there is a common understanding that this conflict is frozen. So we proved that it is not frozen. We had to fight. We have to sacrifice 3,000 lives in order to restore our dignity, our territorial integrity and justice, and implement UN Security Council resolutions. Therefore, we cannot take out of the context today's situation in Karabakh or our communications with the Armenian community there, and just forget about 30 years of occupation, forget about that the territory equal to the territory of Lebanon is totally in ruins. And that was done not by aliens, that was done by our neighbors who came, occupied our land, made 1 million Azerbaijanis homeless, destroyed 65 out of 67 mosques, desecrated them, And then when we kick them out, they now plea for justice. They accuse us of occupation, those who occupied us for 30 years. And also one thing is also should not be forgotten, that the trilateral declaration of November 2020, which Prime Minister referred to, actually de facto, is a capitulation act by Armenia. We fought the war, and the results of the war have been accepted by international community and by Armenian society. And the best indicator to that was a new mandate which Armenian population gave to Prime Minister. And that was a mandate for peace. Therefore, we need to look to the future. And I think that if we look to the future, and today is, as we discussed just prior to the session, is a historical day because for the first time 3 leaders get together. In the independent countries, there was cases like that during the Soviet times. And we should not miss this opportunity. Karabakh Armenians are Azerbaijani citizens, a minority. Azerbaijan is a multi-ethnic country, and all minorities in Azerbaijan enjoy same rights and privileges, including cultural, linguistical, and any other, and also security. And we're ready to start practical communications with representatives of Armenian community in Karabakh. And today, in front of Secretary Blinken, I told my Armenian colleague about that, but we can do it only when Russian citizen, criminal oligarch, person who was involved in money laundering in Europe, Vardanyan, is out of our territory.
Now, as I said, we cannot replace negotiations here, but I would like to give the Prime Minister Pashinyan, a possibility to react to what he heard from President Aliyev. And then also I would like to give the audience, of course, a chance to ask questions and to the panelists. Prime Minister.
Thank you. About Nagorno-Karabakh, you know, President mentioned trilateral statement, and on that trilateral statement we have provision, and we have Nagorno-Karabakh on trilateral statement, and we have signature of the President of Azerbaijan under this document. And we have Lachin corridor that should be freely operable. And by the way, according to that trilateral statement, out of control of Azerbaijan, and it is according to the signature of President of Azerbaijan. And recently, you know, some Armenians children from Nagorno-Karabakh, they tried to travel by bus through Lachin corridor, and they were stopped and masked. Some Azerbaijani persons with masks intruded into bus, and children there were screaming. And that was the last attempt of the Armenians on Nagorno-Karabakh to freely commute through Lachin corridor. President Aliyev mentioned destroyed mosques. You know, I would like to say that in 2017, in Azerbaijan, several mosques were destroyed for building new roads. And President Aliyev mentioned that several, I don't know how many thousand mosques that were destroyed. And by the way, in the Soviet time, and when in Azerbaijan, approximately 1,560 mosques were destroyed, and that it was the usual thing for Soviet Union. In Armenian in Soviet time, churches were destroyed, mosques were destroyed. And you know, Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh, they shouldn't pay the debts from the Soviet time. And you know, it's very important. It is very dangerous narrative, because I'm afraid sometimes there is an impression that Azerbaijan want to give some religious context to this whole situation. It is very dangerous. There is no any religious context in the conflict, and the proof is that that we have very good. And by the way, in our country, we have Muslim minority, and we have in our country acting mosque, and that is the reality. And you know, the wording of Azerbaijan, what is concerning, using the wording of such kind of almost offensive wording, capitulation, etc. You know, from a side, it can be impression that now Azerbaijan want to show that, and that is maybe reality, that Azerbaijan adopted a revenge policy. You know, revenge policy, and maybe that is the policy of Azerbaijan. But as it was mentioned, we have very complicated history. And I just said, yes, maybe it is historical meeting, but for what purpose we want to use this? For inflaming intolerance, hate, aggressive rhetorics in our region, or in opposite, we want to use this platform for making things better. We think that this platform vote to be used for constructive purposes. Of course, we can now tell many stories of enmity, but what is the meaning of our leadership? To deepen that enmity, or to use our capacities, our authorities, our mandates. I'm proud that I've been able, our government was able, even after the devastating war, to have free democratic elections in our country that was worldwide acknowledged as free, democratic, and transparent and competitive. And as I said, from our point of view, is the solution is democracy, the solution is transparency, the solution is dialogue, the solution is respect for all countries in our region. And we are ready to work to that direction. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. We will not be able to go any deeper into this. Again, my appeal is what I said at the beginning, that maybe this will help a bit to have some confidence-building measures, to see to it that when the Lachin corridor is used by children, to get humanitarian aid, to get have people travel there, that this is possible, so that people don't have to suffer from the political differences that subsist there. Also, that they have access to energy. So this is only the appeal we can launch here from this podium. Now, we have a few minutes left, and I would ask questions there. This is a topic where you can have, not ask questions, but give a long statement. So I just warn you, please, only short questions. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Yulia Smilovskaya, Globsec Kiev office. My question I'd like to put with regard to one common denominator that would probably would be much easier for the President and two Prime Ministers to answer with regard to Russia. So basically, have the situation, the war in Ukraine, which was unexpected to most of us, forced you to reconsider your perception of Russia, because right now it is saying that Russia has turned itself from the point of stability into the country of instability in terms of security. So in this case, I see a bit of developments in all the sides with all the countries. So the question to the Prime Minister of Armenia is, you mentioned a couple of times that collective treaty, security defense treaty organization is not very productive at the moment, and raised this issue that you might be, Armenia might be leaving it. So could you develop a bit more on these prospects? Then for the Prime Minister of Georgia, we reassessed the calculations about the potential strategic moves of Russia. While they are losing in Ukraine, they might be considering of making some blitzkriegs in the countries they consider much more vulnerable and easy targets like Moldova and Georgia. Do you see this threat for your country? And for the President of Azerbaijan, you mentioned these negotiations and talks with the participation of US as mediator. So it looks like Russia has lost this role with regard to Nagorno-Karabakh. Could you comment on that, please? Thank you.
I mean, these are very good questions, but this is very unfair because by having three people there is so. But since you're from a partner organization, well, what choice do I have, Prime Minister?
Well, you know, and it was public and transparent. We have some concerns connected with the CSTO, and we raised those issues with our partners, and actually we made it public, and we are working, and the concerns are there in the place, and we are working to address all the issues that and all the questions and concerns that we have.
Thank you for the question. You mentioned about the threats that are coming from Russia. Well, first of all, I have to say that, you know, talking to our European friends, American friends, our international partners, everybody has the same position that we're not in a position now to say something more precisely, concretely, right? What will happen in Ukraine? Of course, the consequences, the result of this war will have impact on countries like Georgia, you mentioned Moldova. Let's be very frank, on the entire European security architecture, on the world. Because what Russia is trying to do now is they're trying to change the international order, rules-based international order. So I think what the experts have been saying to us, within 2-3 months we will have a clear picture about where we are. So you know about Georgia. Georgia is partially occupied, 20% of our territory is occupied by Russia. We experienced this war in 2008. We had indirect, let's say so, war in the beginning of the 90s when the separatists in Abkhazia and Ossetia were backed by the Russians. So we have a good experience. So therefore it's really hard to say what will happen. I think time will show us where we are now, where will be the world, the region, and Europe after Ukraine. So, but I have to repeat what I said in my opening remarks. There is no alternative to the peaceful negotiation and peaceful talks, because we have witnessed that nuclear war rhetoric has come back, which is catastrophic for the entire world, not only for Ukraine and for Europe, but for the entire planet, right? So therefore, we must expect that big players such as United States, China, Russia, European Union, will sit down and talk about the future of this planet. Because once again, the war is not a solution. Georgia is a small country with only 4 million population, again with our own challenges, but what we have managed to achieve in the last decade, this is the only peaceful period, this 10-year period, when we have been in power, we ensured peace and stability. This is what people need. We need peace, stability, and prosperity. So by war, we cannot achieve prosperity, we cannot achieve stability. Thank you.
And President Ալիև.
We have several platforms to address the issues related to normalization of Azerbaijan-Armenian relationship. One of them is so-called Brussels format, and yesterday during the meeting with the President of European Council, Mr. Charles Michel, we once again reconfirmed our commitment to the Brussels process. Today, during the trilateral meeting hosted by Secretary Blinken, we also discussed Brussels process as a trilateral format. And I think there is a common understanding that this is only trilateral, EU, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. There is certain legacy from the so-called former Minsk group, which already retired and actually do not exist, maybe exist only on the paper. Therefore, the former co-chairs of the Minsk group, which actually did not deliver any result for 28 years, they still have some leverage on the situation. Therefore, we have a platform which is hosted by United States, by Russia, and now by European Union, but no longer by France, because of one-sided pro-Armenian position of the French government. And it is clear that when you are a mediator, you cannot take sides, and you cannot demonstrate that you take sides. So this, I think, is the answer to your question. And above of that, I want to say that whoever will help both countries to come to an agreement, of course, will have the champion's medal. But with respect to the peace talks, you know, we can understand this position, but judging from our experience, I can tell you that peace talks sometimes last too long. We had peace talks for 28 years. Can you imagine, from 1992 until 2020? And if we did not resolve Karabakh conflict on the battlefield, these peace talks would have continued for 28 years more. It was absolutely acceptable to Armenia because they wanted to seal the situation, to keep our lands under occupation forever. It was acceptable for Armenian friends in different parts of the world, but it was not acceptable to us. And we were preparing. We were mobilizing our efforts. We were growing new generation which came and liberated the lands which they have never seen because they were young, as they were not even born when Armenia occupied our land. Therefore, peace talks, yes, I am not against, but you have to restore justice by force, and this is your legitimate right. This is right given to you by Chapter 51 of United Nations, and we use that right, and we fought on our territory. Our war was a war of liberation, and that's why it was a just war. Our war was not a war of occupation, and that's why we didn't have a single one from our army who left the battlefield. For 44 days, when our cities and villages were shelled by Iskander missiles, no one left the battlefield. In Armenia, there have been 11,000 deserters. Why? Not because they were losing on the battlefield, because their war was occupational war. There was no motivation for people who were born in Armenia to go to Azerbaijan and to fight for the land which do not belong to them. And what we've seen as one of the results of our liberation war, the main factor is motivation. Weapons, important. Tactics, important. Planning, very important. But motivation is number one. And you cannot conquer the people who want liberty. They can wait. They can wait like we waited for 28 years. But one day they come to their land, they kick out the aggressor, and they put their flag on top of all our historical buildings.
Well, thank you very much for participating in this forum. We did not have, of course, the expectation that we would solve the issues that are unresolved until now. My appeal again to all of you, to all three of you, to look at humanitarian gestures that you can do to improve the situation of people, independent then of, with regard to Armenia and Azerbaijan, of these talks. And I hope that these talks under the auspices of the European Union will yield a lasting success. And then I propose that in a year from now we meet here again and see where we stand. So thank you very much for participating, and thank you very much, Helga, for continuing to work on the one way forward, confidence building measures, OSCE measures where you can work together. So thank you very much.